Hi, welcome to Digging for Truth, presented by Associates for Biblical Research. I'm your host, Henry Smith. Today, New Testament scholar Dr. Craig Evans is back on the show, and we're very happy to have him with us once again. Dr. Evans, welcome back to Digging for Truth.
Thank you very much, Henry. Good to be with you.
Good to see you. We're going to talk about a fun subject today. It has to do with the Gospel of Mark, chapter 5. We're going to talk about demons and pigs and exorcisms. But before we do that, I just want to mention congratulations to you. At the airing of this show, you will be on the Bible Seminary faculty with our mutual friend and colleague, Dr. Scott Stripling. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. This has been great making this transition. What a good faculty, a great program. I know I will enjoy it immensely.
Well, awesome. Those of you who might be pursuing a theological education, consider the Bible Seminary. Of course, they have an archaeology program as well, but now Dr. Evans, New Testament expert, will be there. All right, now speaking of New Testament stuff, Dr. Evans, we want to talk about something that we did another show with Dr. Stripling about the geography of the exorcism in Mark 5. But what I'd like you to do is sort of set the stage for us. Tell us about that account, set the stage for the audience, and then we'll get into some details.
Well, yeah, the real big issue in Mark chapter 5, and this is the passage known as the demoniac who calls himself Legion. It's on the east side of the Sea of Galilee. The question is exactly where on the east side? And the manuscripts are confused. And so you have at least three different locations mentioned in the manuscripts. And when I say the manuscripts, I mean manuscripts for Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And so it's not just Mark 5, but the parallels in the other Gospels. And so they give us three names. They give us the name Gerasa, that would be Jerash. That's 30 miles southeast from the eastern shore of the Sea of Galilee. Other manuscripts give us Gadara, which is about 6 or 7 miles south of the shoreline. And of course, the problem becomes obvious. How in the world could you have a herd of swine in the vicinity of one of these two cities, never mind Jerash, so far away, and then they stampede all the way to the Sea of Galilee and plunge over a cliff and drown in the lake? It just doesn't seem plausible. Then there's a third a city. It's a small village called Gergesa, and it's near Kursi. And that was a favorite city, a favorite location in the Byzantine and Crusader period of time. There's actually a shrine built there. And it is in the northeast corner of the Sea of Galilee, by a cliff, by some tombs overlooking the lake. And that is favored by Origen, who actually visited the site and spoke to locals. And so in my own investigation of this, textually, I felt that is the correct location. And I asked Scott Stripling, this was a couple of years ago, hey, you're going to be in Shiloh doing your excavation. Is it possible you could take a day off and go up to the Sea of Galilee and check that out? He very graciously did. They actually did some filming, and it was confirmed there is a stone quay, a dock there. There are cliffs. There are the remains of some caves that were used as tombs. It is near Kursi, or the ancient Gergesa. And I felt like, okay, I'm writing my commentary on Mark. I am willing now to step out and say, this is the location. Archaeology supports it. The ancient textual evidence supports it. But the scribal confusion is understandable because Gergesa was unknown in the Greek world. And so the better known cities of Gerasa and Gadara, understandably, which sounds similar spellings, I can see why scribes who just didn't know the area chose those names. And that was the point Origen made. And I think he's correct.
Yeah, Origen going all the way back to the 3rd century. So he did some good work on that. And then you and Scott have done this updated work. And again, we mentioned that people check out that episode. We got some great footage of them on the boat in the water, showing the ancient harbor that was there and all that kind of stuff. I think you've resolved that textual issue. Very fascinating how archaeology in this case helps the textual scholar, right?
Yes, and in the topic we're going to be looking at in a few minutes, it does so again. Archaeology, I think, comes through in a big way and answers some skepticism. You always expect skepticism from some people, passage by passage, and there have been skeptics here in this case in Mark 5 saying the idea of the demonized man calling himself Legion and then pigs, swine involved. This has to be anachronistic because it's alluding to a Roman legion in the north, and nobody would have known this until the outbreak of war in the 60s AD. So archaeology, once again, I think sheds important light on this question.
So just to reframe a little bit what you said, and then you can comment on it some more. So Jesus has this encounter with the demons. They call themselves Legion. That's their self-designation, right? And so this connection to the Roman legion, the skeptics are saying the Roman legion wasn't in the area at the time of Jesus's life, around 30 AD, something like that. We'll just say for the sake of discussion. Am I framing the skeptical argument correctly? And that some author later, Mark, put this back in, but it's an anachronism. Is that all correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, you've got it. There are basically two ways of being skeptical. One of them is saying the entire story is composed after the Jewish rebellion in 66, when this Roman legion we're going to talk about went south from Syria into Galilee, through Galilee, and then eventually ended up surrounding and participating in the capture of Jerusalem in the summer of 69, the summers of 69 and 70. And that's one thing to say the entire story has been invented. The other one is no, there was a story. It just got updated and reference to pigs, perhaps the swine, drowning in the sea. This is a item added later because people became aware of a Roman legion whose mascot is a pig, a wild boar. And so those are the 2 points of skepticism. And they both, I think they're naive. They rest on the idea, number one, that the local inhabitants have no idea of a Roman legion posted some miles to the north. And number two, the idea that a Roman legion never goes anywhere, that the entire legion comprising of 5,000 to 6,000 men, they just stay seated in one spot. They never go anywhere. And of course, that's just a misunderstanding of the activities of the legion. And so that's a point I want to make in our conversation today, and also and point out that there are some archaeological finds that support this and make it clear how people in Galilee, as well as far south as Samaria and Judea, would most certainly know of Roman legions and their mascots. And of course, there are 2 legions whose mascot is a wild boar, and that would be incredibly offensive to the Jew. You can imagine Roman legions marching around through the sacred land, the Holy Land, and they're holding these standards, and on the standard is the picture of either a boar's head or the entire wild boar body, and that would be very, very offensive.
Yes, that makes total sense. So in our next segment, we're going to explore one of the questions that you raised there was, do we have any evidence that the Galileans were aware of the Roman legion much earlier at the time of Jesus, as opposed to after the revolt? And we'll explore that question with Dr. Evans right after this break.
Digging for Truth is produced and recorded in the studios of Lighthouse TV. Positively different.
Hi, welcome back to Digging for Truth. I'm here with Dr. Craig Evans, and we're exploring Mark chapter 5. Okay, we were talking about Roman legions in the region where Jesus, sends the demons out of the man, exorcise the demons. They go into the pigs and they go down into the sea. So a couple of things. One is, do we have any evidence that the Galileans would have had knowledge of the legions? And the second thing is, What is a Roman legion? Give us some details about what that is. People have probably heard of it, but don't know much about it.
Yes, that's right. At the end of the previous segment, I mentioned how there's a widespread assumption that a legion, the entire legion, numbering 5,000 to 6,000 men, are stationed in one location, and they simply sit there unless they're ordered as an entire legion to move somewhere else. That's a misunderstanding. The legions are made up of several subunits. Some people know that. Everybody's heard of a centurion. They know that word century or centurion means 100. There's Cornelius, the famous centurion in Caesarea Maritima, who invites Peter to share the gospel with him. That's described in Acts 10. A centurion is a commander, or it'd be like a lieutenant today, who is in command of perhaps as many as 100 men. Oftentimes it's only 80 or 90. So that's the smallest subunit. Then there's a cohort, usually made up of 5 of these units. And so it could number anywhere from 400 to 500 men. That's a cohort. We actually have 2 cohorts specifically mentioned in the book of Acts. There's the cohors Italica, or the Italian cohort, which is mentioned in Acts chapter 10. And that's the passage where Cornelius, the centurion, is involved. So a cohort would be 5 or so of these centuries, or these 100 unit men. And then we have the Augustan cohort, cohors Augustan, mentioned in Acts chapter 27. So the author of Acts is aware of centuries and cohorts. But what a lot of people don't know is that there's also something called vexillatio. And it can be 2, 3 cohorts. It can be as many as 2,000 men. In other words, about 1/3, or even a bit more than 1/3 of a legion. Now, here's where it gets interesting. These units move around. And so you might have a legion officially stationed in a particular city in Egypt, in Israel, in Syria, or somewhere else. But there could be centuries or cohorts or even vexillations that are sent in different locations. And of course, the evidence for that is right there in the book of Acts. And so in Acts chapter 10, and we're talking still the 30s, so only a few years after the death and resurrection of Jesus, right there in Caesarea Maritima, where Cornelius is, there is a cohort. And you wouldn't say that if the entire legion is there. So the implication is that this cohort is in Caesarea Maritima, but the mother legion of which it is a part, and that could be as many as 4,500 men, are somewhere else. And the same thing about the Augustan cohort that's mentioned in Acts 27. Where's the rest of the legion? Probably somewhere else. And this helps us understand that if we have a legion, Legion 10, and that's the one we're talking about now, the one that has the symbol of the boar's head, it's called Legion 10 Fretensis. And it is stationed before the outbreak of war in 66. It is north of Galilee in Syria. But we must not assume that all 5,000 to 6,000 men are located there all together, and they never go anywhere unless the entire body as a body moves. And we actually have archaeological evidence that there were movements of certain parts and portions and officers of this legion.
Yeah, that's really helpful. So a couple things. I think just from a common sense perspective, I mean, if you use an analogy of modern military, a battalion is stationed in a particular place. Well, the men or the soldiers serving, they're going to go out to here, and then they're going to come back later. They're going to go stay here for a while. They're going to go do this. They're going to do that. Just if you name them, it doesn't mean the whole thing is there. So the whole legion or the whole group. That just seems like almost kind of a silly argument. Just from a broader military perspective, I mean, what you describe seems to me to be standard military practice for any standing military. Am I thinking clearly about that?
Oh, you're right. You're right, Henry, and that's the way it is today.
Yeah.
World War II, we've seen all kinds of movies and reenactments and everything. And here's Easy Company. Remember that? A
Yes.
band of brothers. This is a single company that's part of the 101st Airborne. And of course, the entire 101st Airborne is not always together. You have these units, companies, battalions, and so on that are in different locations. Well, that's the way it was in antiquity. There's another thing I think it's an assumed, it's unexpressed, a very faulty assumption on the part of some of the skeptics, and that is there is no communication, there is no travel, nobody knows anything. So you'll have people say, don't forget, back then there wasn't any internet, nobody had cell phones, and so nobody knew anything, and that's very condescending on our part. The ancient people, they were civilized, they had roads, they knew how to communicate. There was travel. The correspondence that we have recovered by the tens of thousands, papyri in Egypt makes that abundantly clear. We have letters, which almost always letters, correspondence have dates. And so we'll have a letter, a copy of a letter that's sent to somebody in Ephesus. So it's sent from Egypt, a place like Oxyrhynchus. And then we have the reply to that letter that has been received. And here both of them are together, found in an archive, unearthed, 125 years ago. And the dates of the original letter sent and then the date of the reply is only a matter of weeks difference. Can you imagine that? And so somebody has written a letter, it's gone onto a boat that goes downstream the Nile, it crosses the Mediterranean, ends up in Ephesus or Corinth or somewhere else. The person receives it, writes his response, sends it back, and it ends up in Oxyrhynchus 1 month later. I mean, that's mail service almost as fast as it is today.
Yeah, it's
so they knew how to communicate, and they did so swiftly.
I would assume, and we'll go to a break after this, I would assume also that when the revolt broke out, that they would have probably moved more troops into Israel just for this because of the situation. So again, the military moving because of the dynamics, orders coming down from above, that kind of thing, that just seems to me to be kind of normal stuff. So much ado about nothing, it sounds like to me, Dr. Evans. Well, let's explore it some more after this break.
Bible and Spade is a non-technical quarterly publication published by the Associates for Biblical Research. Written from a scholarly and conservative viewpoint, Bible and Spade supports the inerrancy of the biblical record and is a must-read for both the serious Bible student and anyone asking if they can really trust the Bible. Archaeological evidence, properly interpreted, upholding the history of the Bible. Subscribe today at BibleArchaeology.org.
Hi, welcome back to Digging for Truth. I'm here with Dr. Craig Evans. We're talking about the Roman legion in the region of Cursi, the account in Mark 5 and the exorcism and the pigs going into the Sea of Galilee and the relationship between those two. Okay, Dr. Evans, let's explore this some more. You wanted to talk a little bit about the Roman road system a little bit and how this is important for this, and then some archaeology that shows the presence of part of the Roman legion in Israel.
Yeah, and I want to continue with the point that was just made about the papyri, the correspondence evidence. This is hard evidence of rapid travel. Now, in the examples I gave from Oxyrhynchus, Egypt, with letters being sent to parts of Asia Minor, Greece, and elsewhere, we're mostly dealing with fast boats that move up and down rivers that cross the Mediterranean Sea and do so in a matter of days or a couple of weeks or whatever. But let's talk now about the network of roads. And thanks to modern technology, a lot of it, drones and they look down and infrared and heat detection and so on. We can discover, the remains of foundations and roads and so on. And so this is mostly mapped out now. And it's extraordinary. If you look at a map that shows the roads from the Greco-Roman period of time in Israel itself, it's spiderwebbed with roads. This has an implication for Jesus in Nazareth growing up. He didn't grow up in rustic isolation, disconnected from the world. That was a fantasy that some interpreters entertained 100, 150 years ago, the Jesus in a bucolic village setting as though it's sleepy and nobody ever goes anywhere. No,
Yeah.
people travel. We can now study pottery. It must have come from this a source of clay and this pottery from that source of clay. It's very clear the Jewish people preferred pottery made by Jewish potters, so it's pure and so on. And so to buy pottery that's made 30 miles away, you have to have a network of roads. And so how does this relate to what we're talking about? Well, the Romans built roads primarily to move their legions around. You all know that saying, all roads lead to Rome. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
rather sinister statement because it's the reverse that really is being stated, and that is all roads go from Rome to wherever you live. And you
Yeah.
don't want to forget that. Don't mess around. The Roman legions can be in your face really quickly. And that's the point of these roads. Yes, it facilitates commerce, travel, and so forth. But the real point of these roads is the legions and various detachments can get to places quickly. And we have evidence of that that directly relates to this question about the people in Galilee, the people on the west side of the sea, who would be mostly Jewish, the people on the east side of the Sea of Galilee, who would be mostly Gentile. Would they recognize an allusion to pigs and somebody calling himself Legion? Would they put that together and think, oh my goodness, this is a Roman legion that we're talking about, a demonic Roman legion that Jesus has defeated? Would they know that, say, in the 20s or 30s? They certainly would know that in the 60s when the entire Legion 10 Fretensis and its boar's head mascot travel south through Galilee on their way to, eventually on their way to Jerusalem.
Right.
Sure, they
Right.
would know that in the 60s. The question is, would they have known that in the 20s and 30s? And so, in other words, the story is told in Mark can be historical. The details have not been added to it later. The whole story hasn't been invented later. It happened in the late 20s, early 30s, as the Gospel of Mark and Matthew and Luke say. Well, there's archaeological evidence that shows us that most certainly the people in Galilee or Gaulonitis and the Decapolis on the other side of the lake, they certainly would know this. And we have archaeological evidence of detachments being moved around from Fretensis prior to the outbreak of war in 66 AD. And that's what we want to talk about. We actually have two inscriptions referring to an officer from Fretensis. His name is Aulus, Aulus. That's just the first of three names. And he has an unusual name, and that's why epigraphers, Jewish and Christian alike, are convinced he's the same guy. He's in two inscriptions. One of them is in Ascalon. The other one is in Egypt. It's the same guy, and he's in Fretensis basically as a centurion. It's a ranking centurion that puts him. He's in with the officers concerned with the men who throw spears, and he is thanked for his benefaction. You're not thanked for a benefaction because you've been in a town for a weekend. You're thanked for benefaction because you've been there a long time and did something.
Yes.
You donated money, you built something. It's like the centurion in Capernaum who's thanked for helping to build the synagogue. And this is evidence right there that a Roman officer stationed, attached to Fretensis in Syria, north of Galilee, and yet there he is in Ascalon, and this is before the war. He's in Ascalon in the west on the Mediterranean Sea, there for some time, and no centurion rides all by himself on a horse. He has officers with him,
Yes.
and they carry their standards. People in Galilee would have seen him coming and going, and so there'd be no mystery. He's from Fretensis up north, and their mascot is a pig.
That's fantastic. Fits very nicely Well, believe it or not, we got about a minute and a half left. I want to throw out this quick question. Does this help explain people telling Jesus to leave, go away? If I'm getting this account right, they're not only maybe afraid of his divine power, but afraid of what the Romans might do. Is that your interpretation of this?
That's a very good possibility, because not only it's been speculated they're growing pork, they're raising pork for the Roman legion. And there are retired legionnaires from different legions living in the Decapolis. And Jesus just destroyed a herd. How are they going to explain that to their masters?
Yeah.
And they tell Jesus, get out of here, probably because they fear there could even be more destruction. That would not be the only herd of swine in the area. They want Jesus to leave.
Yeah, so interesting. This adds another element to their response. It kind of gives us more background and helps us to understand it better. Of course, when you read it, I've always thought about the financial aspect of it. That's kind of what you hear in preaching, right? You have money and all that kind of thing, but there's something much deeper taking place here, Dr. Evans. Well, we've run out of runway, sir. I'm very sorry to say. Thank you so much for sharing all that with our audience. We're so grateful for your work. And for coming back on Digging for Truth once again.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. Well, friends, thank you for watching Digging for Truth. We hope you appreciated Dr. Evans' expertise on this subject, showing the authenticity of the on-the-ground eyewitness nature of the gospel records, not invented after the fact or pieces added to it after the fact, but the authenticity runs very deep in these records. And here's again an example of why that's the case. We hope you'll trust the message that Jesus is here to deliver us from sin and death and the forces of darkness. Thank you for watching Digging for Truth.